Flight attendants skipped him for a menu. He stayed silent. And 12 airports shut their gates. A black teen in first class was denied a meal because children don't need gourmet menus. He didn't yell, he didn't argue, he just looked at his grandmother and watched her tap once on her tablet. Moments later, 12 of the nation's busiest airports suspended the airline's access. Why? Because that woman in 2B wasn't just any grandma, she was the most powerful figure in U.S. aviation. Where are you watching from? If you believe respect shouldn't depend on age or skin color, drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this flight is going somewhere no one expected. Caleb Morgan paused at the threshold of the Horizon Airways Flight 119 cabin, the scent of lavender sanitizer and pressurized air hitting his nose all at once. He adjusted the collar of his blazer, tugged it once like he'd practiced, and stepped into the aisle with a quiet confidence that belied the storm brewing in his chest. He was 15 years old with deep brown skin and tightly coiled hair cropped short above his temples. His frame was lean but upright, the kind of posture that had been drilled into him by years of his grandmother's reminders. Posture is power, Caleb, especially when they want to pretend you're not there. The cabin shimmered with opulence. Cream-colored leather seats gleamed under soft amber lights. Walnut paneling ran like velvet across the cabin walls. Tiny crystal bottles of water sat perfectly aligned in recessed cup holders. It was a world designed for wealth, quietness, and white noise, and Caleb knew he wasn't what most of these passengers expected to see in seat 2A. Behind him, Evelyn Morgan stepped forward without hesitation. 68 silver curls pinned neatly beneath a navy silk scarf she didn't need to speak to command a room. She wore quiet authority like cologne. Her charcoal overcoat swayed as she walked, heels tapping softly on the carpeted aisle. To strangers, she looked like a retired diplomat. To Caleb, she was a fortress. As they moved into the first-class section, heads lifted, not dramatically, just enough to register, the kind of glance that lingered a heartbeat too long. A man in 1C raised his eyebrows and returned to his tablet. A woman across the aisle nudged her husband. No one said anything, but Caleb felt it. The heat of curiosity disguised as civility, the same look he'd gotten in the honors math class, the same look his dad used to call the audit. He inhaled and held the air in his chest as they reached their seats, 2A and 2B. He had studied the cabin layout online the night before, memorized the seat configuration, read the meal options, practiced how to ask for sparkling water with a twist of lime, just like the adults. He slid into 2A, set his tablet in the pocket in front of him, and rested his science journal gently on the fold-out table. His fingers trembled only slightly, but he noticed. Evelyn sat beside him, calm as ever, folding her coat neatly and tucking it behind her. She didn't look around the cabin. She didn't need to. She had seen this theater before. Caleb straightened his tie and glanced sideways at her. Posture, she said softly without looking. He adjusted his spine. A flight attendant approached. Early 40s, blonde, impeccable posture, name tag gleaming Vanessa. "Good afternoon," she said brightly, but the brightness dimmed just a fraction when her eyes landed on Caleb. She offered a faint smile, then turned her attention to the other passengers gliding down the aisle like a politician on parade. Leather-bound menus appeared from her satchel, placed delicately into each adult's hands. A couple in their 60s, a young man with a briefcase, another woman in diamonds, smiles, nod, menu, smile, nod, menu. She passed row 2. Her hand moved from Evelyn's tray table to the next row, skipping Caleb entirely. No pause, no hesitation, as if he weren't even there. Caleb blinked, then looked down at the smooth walnut table in front of him. It felt suddenly colder than it had a second ago. Across the aisle, someone chuckled faintly, or maybe he imagined it. Evelyn said nothing, but her hand resting on her lap tightened just a fraction. Her knuckles whitened beneath her rings. Caleb opened his science journal and stared at a formula on the page. He wasn't reading, not really. His jaw clenched just once. "I belong here," he whispered in his mind. "I earned this seat. I earned this moment. They don't get to erase that with a smile and a skipped menu." The plane's engines rumbled beneath them. The final passengers filed in. Vanessa returned to the galley, her polished shoes clicking faintly on the aisle floor. Caleb stared straight ahead. He knew this flight hadn't even left the ground yet, but something had already taken off. Something silent, something sharp, something with wings. Caleb didn't move at first. He just sat still, trying to tell himself it didn't matter. that maybe it was an oversight, that maybe she'd be back. But Vanessa Creed returned all right. Not with a menu, but with a plastic snack box clutched delicately between her gloved fingers. The kind of box handed to children on long-haul flights. Bright colors, cartoon airplane logo, a sealed juice pouch already sweating from condensation. "Here you go, sweetie," she said, bending slightly at the waist and placing the box on his tray table. Her voice was syrupy artificial, calculated. "We don't serve the gourmet meals to children, but this one's got grapes and crackers. Just the right size for you." The entire row seemed to still. Her words hadn't been loud, but they'd been loud enough. 2 seats behind someone coughed awkwardly. Across the aisle, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband and muttered something. He didn't respond, just smiled and shook his head like he'd expected as much. Caleb's throat burned, but he swallowed it. He didn't say anything. He wouldn't give her the performance she wanted. Instead, he lifted his eyes, measured calm, and said in the voice Evelyn had taught him to use when the world got cruel, firm, clear, unshakable. "Thank you," he said simply. Vanessa blinked as if surprised, then smiled with practiced grace and moved on. Caleb stared at the snack box. The label read Junior Jetpack. A cartoon lion gave him a thumbs up from the corner. He reached out slowly, peeled back the plastic and found a cluster of seedless grapes, 3 salted crackers, a cheese triangle in foil, and a mini juice pouch labeled Tropical Burst. Not exactly seared duck breast or wild mushroom risotto. He touched the grapes but didn't eat. Beside him, Evelyn hadn't spoken a word. She didn't look over. But her hand moved, slow and purposeful, and pulled the menu from her tray. Without glancing away from the window, she slid it across the shared armrest, rested it beside Caleb's elbow like a quiet offering. He glanced at her eyes flickering. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just nodded, barely, and tapped once on the table with her index finger. "You still belong here. Take what's yours." Caleb opened the menu with slow fingers. Truffle risotto, Wagyu sliders, herbed salmon with citrus glaze. Desserts with names in French he'd practiced pronouncing in the mirror last night. His stomach twisted, not with hunger, but with something deeper, something sharp, something ancient. The snack box still sat there, open, bright, childish, a symbol. He glanced around the cabin, saw the side eyes, the flickering curiosity in passengers too polite to stare but too intrigued to ignore. A young woman across the aisle, black maybe in her early 30s, lifted her phone discreetly. Her lens hovered near her lap, angled just enough to capture the tray table, the snack box, the boy who hadn't flinched. Caleb's heart pounded, but his face didn't show it. He closed the menu carefully, placed it beside the snack box, and folded his hands on his lap. He remembered what Evelyn had told him once, during a family reunion when a waiter skipped him for drinks, assuming he was just tagging along. "You don't yell when they overlook you," she'd said. "You let your stillness remind them that erasure has consequences." The flight attendant returned minutes later with a second round of menus. She passed them to a couple near the bulkhead, then to a man scrolling through stock prices. She did not glance at Caleb, not once, but Caleb saw her. He watched the way she avoided his row with surgical precision, like he was something foreign, unqualified, like he was invisible. Evelyn finally spoke. One sentence, soft, intentional. "She doesn't know who you are," she said. Caleb turned to her eyes sharp with a question. Evelyn didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Not yet. Across the cabin, the quiet started to crack. A businessman frowned toward the front. A teenage girl whispered to her mother. A steward near the galley exchanged a glance with a junior attendant. Something had shifted. Something small, but real. Caleb leaned back into the leather seat snack box, untouched hands still folded. His spine straightened inch by inch. They could deny him a menu, but they couldn't deny him the moment, because now the moment was watching them back. The snack box sat untouched. Its cellophane lid had fogged over from the cabin's climate control droplets, condensing like the breath Caleb wasn't letting out. He stared through it, past the grapes and crackers, past the foil-wrapped cheese wedge, to a space far beyond the tray table. He was still, but not still, like stone. Still like a coiled spring, still like his grandmother had taught him. Around him the cabin breathed in its usual rhythm, genteel quiet, bored, but a new kind of hush had begun to bloom, subtle as condensation but just as inevitable. Passengers were watching, not all, not openly, but enough. He could feel it in the way conversations dimmed as flight attendants passed by and the glances flicked toward him that didn't bounce away as quickly as they used to. He didn't look up, but he felt every eye, every pause. From the corner of his vision, he caught a woman in 3D leaning closer to her husband, phone pressed between them. "He's just a kid," she whispered. The man shook his head. Not in her eyes. Caleb kept his spine straight and his hands clasped neatly on his lap. The way his grandmother had shown him, dignity is a language even when no one's speaking to you. In that moment, he wasn't just a boy with a snack box, he was a mirror. And everyone in that cabin was starting to see their own reflections in him. He reached toward the tray, not for the food, but for the folded napkin beside it. He took it between his fingers and began folding it twice with quiet precision. An unconscious ritual, a meditation. He didn't hear Evelyn unlock her tablet beside him, but he saw the faint light at the edge of his vision. Her fingers moved swiftly, purposefully. She wasn't scrolling. She was preparing. Directive Echo 12. Status standby. Caleb didn't ask. He didn't need to. He knew what it meant when his grandmother's lips pressed into that particular line. Not anger, not panic, command. Meanwhile, Vanessa Creed returned, not to apologize, not to acknowledge, to escalate. She approached seat 2A with the practiced confidence of someone who'd spent her career deciding who belonged and who didn't, and rarely being questioned. Her heels clicked softly on the aisle carpet. Her blazer was crisp scarf perfectly knotted. Her smile, tighter this time. "Sweetie," she began again louder than before, voice pitched to Carrie. "I told you earlier, we don't serve those gourmet meals to children." She gestured vaguely toward the front of the cabin as if the truffle oil might leap from the galley and ruin the upholstery. "You'll spill it all over these seats, won't you?" she added with a rehearsed chuckle, turning slightly so the passengers behind could hear. A few chuckles floated back, nervous, unsure. Caleb didn't move. Vanessa pulled a laminated safety card from the seat back in front of him and tapped it. "It's just policy," she said with theatrical finality. Then, as if punctuating a sentence, she reached into her apron and produced a second snack bag. She dropped it gently onto his tray with a smug flourish. "This is what we have for little ones." The rustle of the bag was louder than the engines. Caleb's ears buzzed. But he didn't blink. He didn't look at her. He didn't look away. Across the aisle, the woman with the phone had started filming again. The red record light blinked softly, unnoticed by Vanessa. Someone in 4A whispered, "Is she serious right now?" A teenager nearby, light-skinned earbuds dangling, shook his head and muttered under his breath, "That's foul." Vanessa gave a small, satisfied nod and turned on her heel. That's when Evelyn moved. Not much, just one deliberate tap. The tablet lit up Directive Echo 12, engage. And with that, everything began to change, just not where Vanessa could see it yet. At that moment, Caleb didn't know about the cascading alerts flooding into the Federal Aviation Inclusion Board's real-time dashboard. He didn't know about the terminal managers already receiving soft pings from Sierra International. He didn't know that Horizon Airways' access to 12 major airports was about to be re-evaluated. What he knew, what he felt, was this? The plane hadn't left the tarmac, but the ground was already shifting. He looked down at the tray, 2 snack boxes stacked like shame, 2 refusals wrapped in plastic. He slowly peeled open the top bag, removed a cracker, and placed it gently on the napkin he'd folded. He wasn't hungry. He was anchoring himself. Let them watch. Because whatever came next, he was ready. Caleb didn't look at her as Vanessa Creed walked away. He didn't need to. The sound of her retreat, heels tapping, smugness radiating, was already imprinted in his memory. He could have traced the rhythm of it like a map. 2 snack boxes. No menu. An entire cabin of silence watching him as if he were a disruption instead of a passenger. He picked up a cracker, snapped it in half with deliberate care, and placed both halves back in the tray. It wasn't pettiness. It was control. The kind that comes when someone has taken your dignity, and you choose not to hand over your poise. Beside him, Evelyn Morgan was still as stone. Her eyes, fixed on the seat in front of her, betrayed no emotion. But Caleb could feel the tension in her posture. Years of navigating polished rooms, whispered insults, and backdoor contracts etched into every muscle. She had fought this war before. Only this time the battlefield had leather seats and complimentary champagne. Her tablet sat balanced on her knee. The screen glowed faintly. Directive Echo 12 active. From an outside view, she looked like any other passenger checking emails. From inside the command lattice of American Aviation, her Her keystroke had triggered the most advanced operational lockdown protocol in the industry, one only a few people in the country even knew existed. Horizon Airways just didn't know it yet. In the cabin, the energy shifted, subtle but undeniable. A man in 1B checked his phone and frowned. The woman in 3C refreshed her flight tracker app twice, then again. The server interface stalled. Connection error. She blinked. The teenage boy with the earbuds leaned across the aisle toward Caleb just enough to whisper, "That was messed up, man. You okay?" Caleb turned, met his eyes, and nodded once. It was all he needed to say. The snack box sat untouched. The second one, Vanessa's final insult, remained sealed. Passengers were whispering now. Some watched Caleb openly. Others cast glances toward Vanessa, who stood near the galley chatting with a junior attendant, completely unaware that she had become a main character in a story already spiraling out of her control. A woman 2 rows back tapped her phone screen. A red light blinked. Her lips moved. This is going viral. Caleb adjusted the cuff of his shirt. His heartbeat had slowed now, not from calm but from clarity. He wasn't embarrassed anymore. He was documenting. Every motion, every sound, every glance. It all felt loaded, like the moments before a storm hits. Except this storm wore polished heels and policy smiles. He folded his napkin again, a small, precise triangle. Evelyn shifted beside him just enough to tap once more on the tablet. A second screen opened. Federal Aviation Inclusion Board access suspension confirmed. Horizon Airways effective immediately. SFO, LAX, JFK, ATL, ORD, DFW, CBOS, MIA, DEN, IAD, BWI. 12 airports. 12 choke points. 12 financial arteries severed with surgical precision. Evelyn locked the screen, leaned back. The cabin lights dimmed gently for takeoff. No one moved. The pilot's voice crackled overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting on final clearance from traffic control. Shouldn't be long." Behind his voice, something in his tone sounded off. Even he didn't believe it. Vanessa walked past again, this time slower. Maybe she sensed it, maybe not. She didn't look at Caleb, didn't acknowledge him, but she glanced toward Evelyn just long enough to hesitate. And that pause, barely half a second, was the crack Caleb had been waiting for. She felt it. The shift. Not yet a consequence, but a presence. And sometimes presence is all it takes. Caleb let his fingers rest gently on the armrest. His back straightened on instinct. He didn't smile, but he met Vanessa's eyes, and for the first time she looked away. A few rows back, a business traveler muttered to his seatmate, "That kid, he didn't even flinch. Makes you think." The seatmate replied, "Wonder what's going to happen when this lands." The first man shook his head. "I think it already did." Caleb leaned back into his seat, the hum of the engines whispering beneath him. Above him, the cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. It was subtle, but to him it felt like the plane itself had exhaled. Something had been set in motion, and no one, not even the woman with the smile that cut like glass, could stop it now. 500 miles away, in a sterile glass tower overlooking the Potomac River, 12 red alerts blinked across the command screens of the Federal Aviation Inclusion Board, FAIB. Slot denied. Access suspended. Directive Echo 12 active. Operators at FAIB headquarters stared in stunned silence as the data poured in. Within 2 minutes, the 12 busiest airports in the country, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, had revoked landing rights for Horizon Airways effective immediately. A senior coordinator adjusted her headset and spoke calmly into the intercom. "Notify all control towers. Directive is live. All Horizon aircraft must reroute or ground. Priority, hold on gates. Repeat, priority, hold." Back on Flight 1119, the pilot's voice returned to the cabin, now noticeably strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received word of a temporary delay due to systems coordination. Will update you shortly." Translation: something big had just snapped. Caleb heard the confusion in the crew's whispers near the front. One of the junior flight attendants, Lena, a young Latina woman who had silently watched Vanessa earlier, peeked toward seat 2A, her eyes flickering with sympathy, then concern. Evelyn had not moved. Her tablet was off now. Mission complete. At Horizon Airways headquarters, the chaos had detonated. Inside the operations control room, technicians stared at cascading error messages flashing across every departure board. Slot rejected airport access, revoked flight path termination, initiate containment. The lead operations manager barked into her headset. What the hell is this? Who authorized a lockdown? No one answered. Across the hallway, the CEO's office door burst open. Reed Garson, mid-50s, gray at the temples and sweat blooming under his collar, stormed inside. His chief operating officer held up a trembling phone. You need to see this. A paused video. A flight attendant. A boy. A snack box. The ticker at the bottom read 4.7 M views. #dignity first. FAA response pending. Reed stared, lips pressed thin. Find her, he said quietly. Now. Vanessa Creed was in a holding room at the airline's executive terminal, seated across from Marisol Chen, VP of People and Culture. The walls were glass. The view was beautiful. The air was cold. On the table between them, a screen played the clip again. Vanessa smiling. The boy silent. The snack box delivered like a verdict. Marisol didn't say a word for 15 seconds, letting it land. You've seen this? She asked finally. Vanessa nodded stiffly. It's been edited. Out of context. Which part? Marisol asked, voice soft. The part where you humiliated a black child, or the part where he stayed composed while you confirmed he didn't belong? I was following protocol, Vanessa insisted. No gourmet meals for minors. That's always been standard. There is no such policy, Marisol said coldly. You improvised, loudly, publicly, in first class, during pre-boarding. Vanessa's breath caught. I didn't know who he was. That, Marisol replied, is the problem. At that moment, the CEO entered. No preamble. He tossed a single-page document on the table. Immediate termination, conduct unbecoming, flagged FAA ethics violation watch list. Vanessa stared at the paper as if it were written in a language she didn't speak. But, she began, voice cracking. Reed Garson didn't raise his voice. You've compromised our brand, our contracts, our future. We've lost 12 major airports. Our stock's down 17% in one day. You didn't just insult a passenger. He paused. You insulted the Morgan family. Vanessa's head snapped up. The name hit like a bullet. Evelyn Morgan. She remembered it now, vaguely, from onboarding training. The silent woman who ran the board no one could reach, who negotiated airport slots like chess pieces. The kind of name you never said aloud unless you wanted to lose your job. And she'd humiliated her grandson, in front of a camera, and the world. The paper shook in her hands as she signed it. The click of the pen felt louder than the announcement bell. Vanessa stood, smoothed her uniform with trembling fingers, and walked out of the room without looking back. 35,000 feet above Flight 119 finally leveled off. The seatbelt light blinked off with a soft chime, but no one moved. The atmosphere had changed. Caleb sat quietly in seat 2A, posture calm, hands folded. Across the aisle, a woman nodded at him. A young man gave a subtle fist to the chest. Respect. The teenager with earbuds offered a low, "That was cool, man." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Evelyn sat beside him, eyes closed, serene, a monarch in stillness. The cabin lights dimmed. The hum of the engines filled the silence. And above them on Earth, a storm of consequence raged. The clip hit the internet before the plane even touched down. 43 seconds. That was all it took. A boy, a box of snacks, a flight attendant with too much power and too little humility. There were no raised voices, no screaming match, no viral meltdown, just a quiet refusal to disappear. And that, as it turned out, was enough. By the time Flight 119 descended into Los Angeles airspace, the story had spread like wildfire. On TikTok, teens stitched Caleb's silence with the hashtag #DignityFirst, showing themselves holding pretzel packs, grapes, and juice boxes in mock tribute. The caption repeated like a drumbeat, "If he gets a snack, we all get a snack." On Twitter, the video had reached 9.3 million views by 300 p.m. The top comment read, "When you grow up black, you're taught to make yourself smaller in rich spaces, but that boy didn't shrink. He sat tall." On Instagram, stylized stills of Caleb sitting straight in seat 2A appeared with quotes like, "Respect isn't age-restricted." He never raised his voice, but the whole industry heard him. First class, first warning. A STEM scholarship fund was launched by a civil rights education nonprofit, named in Caleb's honor. Within 48 hours, it surpassed $200,000. The founder posted, he didn't ask for a revolution, but one sat down with him anyway. Major outlets scrambled to catch up. CNN opened its evening broadcast with a split screen, one side showing Caleb's now iconic stillness, the other showing Wall Street red arrows. Horizon Airways faces federal suspension from 12 major airports and a potential industry-wide reckoning, all sparked by a quiet moment of bias exposed in a luxury cabin. On MSNBC, a panel of commentators debated whether the incident revealed deeper systemic rot in premium-class culture. We've spent years asking passengers to behave, but maybe it's time we ask airlines to be accountable. Evelyn Morgan, meanwhile, declined all interview requests. The only statement from the Federal Aviation Inclusion Board was brief Directive Echo 12 is in effect. All major carriers are advised to review the new passenger equity charter immediately. Within 36 hours, every major airline, Delta, United, Southwest, JetBlue, had signed the charter. Every airline, except Horizon. Inside Horizon HQ, executives scrambled to contain the bleeding. Their press release hit the wires late and flat. We regret any discomfort caused on Flight 119 and are reviewing internal policies to ensure fairness and dignity for all passengers. The internet shredded it within minutes. Discomfort policies. The replies were brutal. He didn't stub his toe. You humiliated a child on camera. Say his name Caleb Morgan. You didn't review your policy. You got caught. Meanwhile, travelers began canceling Horizon flights en masse. Loyalty point forums exploded with screenshots just rerouted through Denver. Not giving my dollars to disrespect. Booking with Southwest. At least they won't call my son Sweetie and hand him crackers. In the terminal at Sierra International, passengers gathered near TVs overhead. The video looped silently. Seat 2A, the snack box, the stillness. Some watched with hands over their mouths, others with clenched jaws. Parents pulled their children close. A flight attendant, young black, maybe early 20s, whispered to her supervisor, "That could have been my brother." Outside, a row of news vans stretched across the curb. Reporters waited mics ready, but Evelyn didn't stop. She walked calmly through the terminal, Caleb beside her, head high, shoulders squared. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The image alone, grandmother and grandson walking side by side in silence, became the front page of the New York Times the next morning. The headline read, "The Poise That Grounded a Plane." Later that night, in a quiet corner of a hotel lounge, Caleb finally checked his phone. Thousands of notifications, mentions, articles, edits of the clip set to music, messages from strangers thanking him, messages from classmates, from teachers. One DM simply read, "I showed the clip to my son. He said, 'I want to sit like that too. Thank you.'" Evelyn scrolled beside him, her eyes calm. She sipped tea, looked out the window at the distant runway. Then she turned to him and said, "You know this was never about the meal, right?" Caleb nodded. "It was about the message." She raised her cup. "To the power of silence." He clinked his glass of ginger ale gently against hers. Outside, a Horizon Airways jet sat dark on the tarmac. No gate, no crew, no future. Inside, Caleb Morgan leaned back into his chair. Not victorious, just vindicated. A week later, Caleb Morgan boarded another flight. Different route, different airline, but same seat, 2A. He moved with calm familiarity, blazer-pressed shoes polished. His science journal tucked under one arm, a soft leather satchel slung across his shoulder. This time, no one stared. Not because they didn't notice, but because now they understood. A flight attendant approached, young with short, natural curls and a name tag that read Jordan. Her smile was genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Morgan," she said, voice warm. "Would you like a copy of today's gourmet selections?" She extended the leather-bound menu with both hands, not as a formality, but as a sign of recognition. Caleb accepted it, nodding once. "Thank you." She paused for half a breath longer than necessary, then moved on. Across the aisle, an older man glanced up from his newspaper and gave Caleb a respectful nod. In 2C, a woman helped her daughter read the menu, whispering in her ear, "That's the boy I told you about." The little girl looked over at him, wide-eyed and smiling. Caleb didn't respond. He just opened the menu, scanned the dishes, wild mushroom ravioli, duck breast with citrus glaze and artisanal cheese plate, and quietly closed it again. He already knew what they offered. What mattered was being offered at all. Evelyn sat beside him, dignified as always, but now there was something softer in her gaze, almost playful. She sipped from her glass of sparkling water and said, "Looks like they remembered this time." Caleb smiled, small and private. "I didn't have to say a word," he replied. She lifted her brow. "You rarely do. That's the power of a Morgan." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the week settle into something lighter. Above them, the cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane prepared for departure. Caleb rested his hands on the armrest. The leather didn't feel cold this time. It felt earned. A few rows behind him, a young black boy sat with his father. He wore a school blazer just like Caleb's. When their eyes met, the boy smiled shyly and straightened his spine. Caleb offered the faintest nod. The boy grinned wider and whispered something to his dad, who smiled too. Tiny moment. Big echo. Back on the ground, Directive Echo 12 remained in place. Horizon Airways had signed the passenger equity charter, but it came too late to repair the brand. Analysts called it the most expensive snack box in aviation history. Their stock had yet to recover. But more important than headlines were the new protocols, passenger dignity clauses, anti-bias audits, and mandatory cultural accountability workshops across the industry. Airlines were no longer just judged by price or perks, but by principle. A policy born from stillness. As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Caleb looked out the window. The clouds below stretched endlessly, soft, quiet, powerful. He leaned back, letting the hum of the engine settle around him. He wasn't thinking of the snack box. He wasn't thinking of Vanessa Creed or the comments or the trending videos. He was thinking of what it meant to sit in first class, not as a prize, not as a privilege, but as a person who deserved to be there. Because sometimes sitting still is the loudest thing you can do. The flight attendant returned mid-flight with a tray. She bent slightly at the waist and whispered, "We just wanted to say, thank you." On the tray sat a small card, a note handwritten, "Thank you for reminding us what grace looks like. Crew of Flight 308. Caleb read it, held it for a moment, and tucked it gently into the back of his journal. As the plane began its descent, he folded his napkin, placed it beside his untouched dessert, and looked across the aisle. The girl in 2C gave him a small wave. He waved back. No words exchanged, no headlines needed, just quiet understanding. Legacy passed forward. When the wheels touched down, the passengers applauded softly, not because the flight was perfect, but because something in the air had changed. Caleb stood, lifted his satchel, and stepped into the aisle. And as he walked toward the cabin door, every steward and stewardess turned to him, not out of duty but out of respect, because they knew. This wasn't just a passenger. This was a reminder that dignity doesn't ask permission, it just takes its seat. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that matter. This story shows that unchecked prejudice leads to real consequences, while quiet dignity and self-control carry a strength that can shake systems. It reminds us that discrimination isn't always loud. It often hides in policy and silence, in everyday moments that test who we are. Such incidents still happen in first-class cabins, in offices, in schools, and across every space where bias still lingers. By practicing respect and humility, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard, we build a more inclusive and just society.